There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for IC's monthly community of practice. Today, we are delighted to have Jeff Berckes, who is the Digital Equity Coordinator for Iowa's Department of Management. This is a really hot topic right now. Timing is impeccable, and I greatly appreciate Jeff making time to come and talk with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and put the closed captioning streaming link in the chat. If you have questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat at any time. And then I will also be putting a link to Jeff's presentation in the chat for folks as well. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can get started.
All right, so let's get the hard part out of the way first, which is let's share my screen and make sure that you see what I want you to see. So are you seeing the full screen, Amy?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Jeff Berckes. I work for the Department of Management, as Amy said. If you ran into somebody at a party and they introduced themselves and said, I work for the Department of Management, I'm sure that you would back away slowly and you would try to find other conversation, because that sounds like the most boring department to work for ever, right? I don't even know what Department of Management does. It's very new to me. We got sort of brought in under that umbrella here recently. So I'm still learning everything that the Department of Management does. But I was brought in to help lead the digital equity program. It's a very new concept nationwide, at least from a government perspective. Digital equity has been something that's been around for a while and it's been talked about and been researched, but this is the first time there's been any sort of coordinated effort from a federal level and certainly from a state level. And the one thing that I'll kind of clue everybody in on is that we're all still trying to figure this thing out. And every state has been going through a planning process, all 50 states at the same time. We're learning from each other. Right now, and I'll get into this, we're currently in a public comment period for the state of Iowa's plan. It's a big plan. There's a lot to it. I hope that I'm going to be able to cover a little bit of what you might see if you choose to go and look into it. But know that, and I'm going to show to the camera for a visual, that this is not a short document, but there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of times when you write a state plan for a federal government, you have to check a lot of boxes. And there are many things in here that are responsive to the act, but there's also a lot of really good information in here that I think that we were able to develop that is specific to Iowa. And I think are going to help us as we try to implement this plan over the next 5 years. So I'm going to get into a little bit of that. If at any time you have any questions, Amy's going to stop me and make sure that we're discussing things in the right way at the right pace. So let me get going here and see where this goes. So current status of our digital equity plan. I'm going to also talk about how we got here, and that'll be the bulk majority of this. But I thought right now, we're in the smack dab in the middle. Well, not smack dab in the middle, but we're in the middle of the public comment period. So we released the public comment period last Wednesday. It's going to run through the 2nd of February. It's a tight, it's 30 days, which is what we do with the state, but I have a very tight timeline to submit this plan at the end. I had some deadlines that can't be moved from the federal government, which is the NTIA, National Telecommunication Information Administration. Sorry about using an acronym there, but that's it's just who has the funding for this. So I'll be submitting the plan for review in middle of February, and then we will work together over the next 6 weeks to try to hammer out any sort of discrepancies or details that they would like me to sharpen. And I'll have a final document that I'll be able to post at the end of March. And that will be useful not only to me as I turn around and apply for the state capacity grants, which we anticipate will be out at some point in the 2nd quarter of this year. But what I hope is that, and the way that we developed it, and again, we'll kind of get into that here, the way that we developed this plan, I hope that this will be useful for our partners and organizations that are interested in aspects of this work that would like to hook into this plan to try to get some funding from the NTIA for something they're calling competitive capacity grants, which we're anticipating will be out a little later. So I'm guessing sometime in the third quarter of this year. We don't know much about it, but we know that a lot of different types of organizations are going to be eligible for that money. And my program wouldn't be eligible. My program will have an operating budget based on that state capacity grant. We don't know exactly what that money is, somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 17 million, not nearly enough to address all of the issues that we discussed and put in this plan, but it would be a good start and certainly something that we can make some headway over the next 5 years. But I really want as many of our partners and organizations in the state to really consider trying to put in for some of this competitive grant money, and then we can coordinate and work together to see how we can best use our resources moving forward. So that's kind of the big picture where we're at. If you would like to view the public comment process and document, I did link that here in this first slide. It's comment.iowa.gov. There are 2 documents that the state of Iowa currently has a public comment on. We're under the DOM label. So the other one is a workforce development document, and that will give you everything you need to know. That'll have the form to make a public comment if you so choose to want to do so. It'll also just you'll be able to find the full draft. This massive 331 pages. That'll give you a way to download that and absorb that. It's a good sleep aid if you're having trouble sleeping. It can help you with that over the next couple of weeks as you prepare a public comment. But what I was hoping to accomplish with this presentation is to zero in on some of the things that you might see and kind of talk through it, so it's a little less intimidating than the giant page number that the document has. So how did we get here? What did we do to be able to create a document so big in honestly kind of a short amount of time? We've only been doing this for about a year to try to really understand what digital equity means and where we're at in that process. So we held a lot of public meetings last spring. Some of you may have heard about them. Some of you may have even attended. Amy came to help out with one of those public meetings. And I'm going to get into that a little bit and some of the things that we learned. We also commissioned the University of Northern Iowa's Social and Behavioral Science Department to conduct a statewide survey. It's really that really delivered a very rich amount of information that we then laid the foundation for our understanding of different digital equity issues in the state. So that was incredibly important. And then spoiler, that's more than half of those 331 pages is actually UNI's report. So I didn't write all of those pages myself. And then in the fall, we held these facilitated sessions. So we hired a third-party facilitator. It was the Institute for Decision Making up at the University of Northern Iowa to come in and help us really work through kind of a guided approach specific to some of the covered populations, which I'll get into and I'll define here in a couple minutes, so that we could really drill down and understand a little better of some of the challenges that different Iowans face based on some of their challenges as defined by the covered population. So that was really useful to really add some richness to this document as well. And then I tried to turn off my email for about 6 weeks, and I just wrote the rest of the plan. So it was a whole lot of writing, and I joked with Amy that I remember doing this thing in August, and then I don't really know what happened the next 4 months because everything was just kind of insane. And I'm kind of just coming out of that fog of writing a plan. Anybody that's been through a process like that probably understands what I'm talking about. So I want to talk about public meetings. So I have worked for the state of Iowa for most of my career, and most of that career has been in a position where I am responsible for running public meetings. And sometimes I don't want to overstate the value of public meetings because one, I know that not everybody can make a public meeting. I know that people are working. I know that people may not be able to get childcare. I understand the limitations. And that's really important for us to all understand that the people that are able to make a meeting, one, found out about it, two, were, motivated enough to come. So they have certain things that they may want to say, either positive or negative. And it may not be truly representative of a cross section of Iowa. That's something you just have to keep in mind with public meetings. But with that caveat, I think public meetings are really important because you do get a sense of what's happening, particularly geographically. There are going to be changes when you go throughout the state of, this is actually a pretty hot button issue in this part of the state, or, there's a real difference here between the rural meetings and the urban meetings. Like there's certain things that you can capture, particularly when you're doing 55 statewide meetings, which is what we did to try to set the baseline here. So these were really important to kind of start us off on what it was that Iowans were thinking in terms of digital equity issues. And again, I'll define all those things here in a minute. I just wanted to show the map of everywhere we went. So I'm sure that wherever you're at in the state, your eye went right to where you live. So see if you had a circle around you. Just quickly describe the map. If there's a purple circle over that town, that was a rural area meeting that we held. If there's a green circle over that meeting, those are our urban areas as defined by any urban center of 50,000 individuals that live there or more. And if there's a number inside of that green circle, that's the number of meetings that we held. So we held 6 meetings in Des Moines, 2 in the Cedar Rapids, 2 in the Cedar Falls, Waterloo area, 3 in the Cedar Rapids area, 2 in Iowa City area, 2 in the Quad Cities, and 2 in Sioux City. So that was a couple of months of my life, was running around, trying to avoid eating Casey's pizza too many times. As anybody that travels the state knows, that's where you can at least pick up a meal if you're in dire straits. So this was an extensive effort, and it was also really grounding to know there's a pretty substantial report. This was basically the first deliverable that I created that made it into the final report, which was what we learned from these meetings. I'm only going to share just a couple of things because, again, I could talk about this for 45 minutes, and I have, but I just wanted to kind of show a couple of things. This is basically the message that we started off with, which is this idea of describing what are the facets of digital equity? What is it that we're talking about when we're trying to say digital equity? And for us, when we started off with this, we identified 4 things. We talked about access or accessibility, which I know in talking with Amy and people in her realm, when I say accessibility, it means something very different. And in the broadband world, in the high-speed internet world, accessibility really means that you can call an internet service provider and they will come and hook you up to service within a reasonable time frame. And so accessibility is not necessarily the same thing in this world than it is in others. So it was an important distinction to be able to make. And then we wanted to talk about affordability. Regardless of where you're at, internet can be expensive. You may or may not be able to fit that in your budget, or it may be a hardship to be able to fit that in your budget. So what are the ways that Iowans are doing to be able to afford high-speed internet, or are they sacrificing certain things? Or are they going without it because they can't afford it? And are there pathways for them to be able to get that assistance? Digital devices. So, most people have a smartphone, handy, but do they know how to use it? Do they know how, can they afford that? Those things are very expensive. Do they have the right device for the outcomes that they want, right? Like if you're on this Zoom meeting on your phone, you can probably get by, but it would be difficult for me to give this presentation on the smartphone, right? So do you have the right device to be able to get the outcomes that you're looking for? And then digital skills are basically numerous digital skills that are out there to be able to use those devices to get to those outcomes that you want. It's everything from Amy and I troubleshooting the captions with our transcription person, Heather, before the meeting, to being able to put together this presentation, to be able to use Microsoft Excel, to, name all the different skills. We all have to learn all of those different individual skills. Those may be different needs for different individuals. You may only need to have, a handful of digital skills to be able to complete the tasks that you're interested in, or you may need, dozens and dozens and dozens to be able to get through your day. Just kind of depends on what you're looking for at the end. So those are the facets of digital equity as we originally identified them. And the thing that I come back to time and time again is that these are really interrelated. It's tough to really pull these apart, because once you get the fiber in the ground or you get a wireless internet connection that's available to you, you may not be able to afford it. You may not be able to afford those devices. They're very expensive. You may not know how to use those devices, and you may have some of these, but not all of them, right? You may have great digital skills, but you may move to a part of the state that is a dead zone and doesn't have that internet available to you. And so you're out of luck until you can find a way to be able to get that service. So Iowans are in different spots depending on their background, and everything's individual. And so it's good for us to kind of be able to get out there and understand that message. So the next thing that we did was something called dot voting, which is maybe the most fun thing to do when I go to a meeting, because you go to a government meeting and then you just sit there and you listen to a presentation, and you're probably there for like an hour and then you leave. This forced people to participate and give their opinion. And there's no wrong opinion. This is what I always told everybody. This is your interpretation of what you think is happening in your community. And so gave them actual stickers with the different colors and said, hey, your number one issue that you think in your community, don't worry about what your neighbor thinks, but what you think in your community, put that sticker next to one of those 4 facets of digital equity. Now, those of you that have ever been in a meeting ever, there's always a contrarian amongst you. So we offered a 5th category of other, and that got a few votes throughout the process. And, people got to just, tell me what I was missing. But for the most part, people agreed with these 4 categories and put in their colored dots. And so at the end, again, 55 statewide meetings, we had a lot of dot voting activities that were done, and we combined those at the end. And so this is what it looks like. So I'm not sharing a ton from these meetings, but I just wanted to show a couple of things. And the first is just the results of the dot voting. And for I tried to keep the colors consistent. So the bigger the bars in red, which would be the bottom bars, that's the most first place votes that people said, this is the biggest issue that we have in our community. And so you see on the accessibility side, that has the biggest red bar, which means that it earned the most first place votes amongst the dot voting activity. And I think that this is and I won't share all of you can read all of this in the plan, but I won't share this today on the presentation, because again, I could talk about this for quite a long time, is that in the rural areas, this really dominated, this idea of access dominated, because a lot of rural areas are still struggling with that particular aspect of digital equity that we're talking about. Affordability was second place, if you will. It was the thing that got the second most votes, and certainly got a lot of second place votes. And that was pretty consistent, regardless of whether you were in an urban meeting or a rural meeting. That was an issue that came up, and it was prevalent in each place. And then digital skills were kind of third place, if you will, and that came up in places that comfortably had pretty good access. And so again, you take care of that first need of access, and then people start voting in different ways. The digital devices piece didn't come up very often as a top vote getter. And in fact, if you're looking at it from the perspective, it led all 4th place votes. People just didn't think that was that big of a deal. Hey, devices are everywhere. It's not that big of a deal. What I found very interesting, and I'm skipping, again, there are a ton of graphs in the report if you want to dig into more of this, and I'm just kind of giving you a little teaser. But what I found really interesting is on the exit survey, I asked people, well, what is the barrier for you personally? What do you think is the biggest barrier of these 4? And a lot of people voted in that the biggest slice, which is the gray on this pie chart, which is like none. I'm good. I live in an area that has access. I can afford these devices. I can afford internet. I know how to use it. I'm fine, right? And that makes sense. There's plenty of people that came for professional reasons, or I would vote that way too. I don't have necessarily a barrier to digital equity myself. But what I found most interesting on this exit survey is that we had a pretty substantial slice of blue, which is the digital device slice. And so when people thought, well, of the community, I think it's more digital skills, or I think it's more accessibility. But for me, it's actually these devices. They're expensive. They're confusing. They're hard to use. And so I don't think we can lose sight of how important the device piece of this is as we move forward, because a pretty substantial portion of Iowans are still struggling in some way, shape, or form with these devices. So the next thing that I want to talk about, I want to shift a little bit. And again, big write-up on the meetings, if you're interested in learning more about those, is some of the results that we got from the statewide survey. So we had 1,683 respondents. It was, we were double digits in response rate, which is an incredible response rate. Any more to be able to do this. We mailed these physically out to addresses and then gave people the option to respond either by mailing it back or by going online and taking the survey online. About 50% of people mailed back, and the other 50% obviously used online. So it was just kind of an interesting split in that. We found that actually mailing out was pretty important. This is scientifically done in terms of randomization. This is so all of this is done in a way that makes this very scientifically defensible. We didn't just go out and hand out flyers on the street corner asking people to fill this out. This was done in an academic way so that we could feel pretty good about achieving some level of rigor in this. Now, based on the response rate, it's not perfect for all of the covered populations that we'll talk about here in a second, but I think it's a really good foundation, and I'm really proud of the direction that we went with this. So we have questions based on all of those facets, and then some other stuff that we found that really dovetailed in with what we heard at these public meetings and sort of helped form where we went with our goals. So this is a graph that represents the response rate for the number of survey respondents that had wireless internet at home. Most people do currently have some level of wireless or internet service at home, but there's still plenty of people that aren't in that way. And this was pretty consistent with what we know from our mapping with our broadband program. And what I've done in the plan, so you will see these kinds of survey results. You can see the data tables in the University of Northern Iowa survey in the back half of the report if you wanted to dig in there, or you can use basically my crib notes of everything that I did to try to help make things a little more visual and a little more interesting. So there's a lot of charts that will break all of that data down. This is an attempt for me to break down the individual covered populations and their response rate for all of those individual questions. So the Digital Equity Act defines 8 covered populations. And so I just, this is my cue to talk about that here. The 8 covered populations are shown in this little table here, and I have one of these that accompany almost all of my graphs that made sense to break down the response rate for each of the covered populations. So the 8 covered populations, the first one is rural, which means anybody that lives in an area that's fewer than 50,000 individuals in that area. Obviously, it's about half the state. It's about 49.6% of the state, just tipped under 50% here in the last census. Aging individuals, which is anybody aged 65 or older as defined by the act. My mom was not happy about that definition. She felt like should not be included in that list, but I told her that I did not make it up, so she couldn't be mad at me. The survey did a really nice job in the demographics in that we actually asked people to check where they were at with age demographic, and there was 2 options that were considered aging individuals, 65 to 74 and 75 and above. And what's great about that is that in these tables, which I'll explain here in a second, you can see a real difference. So those of you that work with aging individuals, you will see a consistent difference in the response rates for aging individuals that are 65 to 74 and those that are 75 and above. It is consistent that there is a drop off every single time. So this was just turned out to just be a really great demographic question that we asked. The third covered population is covered households, which is the Digital Equity Act's terminology for a poverty measure. So it's anybody that lives in a household making less than 150% of the federal poverty line. Those of you that work with those individuals know that that's a calculation based on the number of individuals in the household. So that number changes. And, we had a way of estimating that based on their response rate for how many individuals live in the household and where they're at in income range. We were able to get a pretty good sense of the number of covered household individuals that responded to this. Veterans, pretty straightforward of what a veteran is. Racial and ethnic minorities is another covered population. In this survey, this is one of the limitations that unfortunately we weren't great at being able to get English learners to be able to identify as English learners and respond to an English language statewide survey. It is an unfortunate limitation. So as a proxy, we used individuals that responded as Hispanic, knowing that that's not a perfect proxy by any stretch of the imagination, and we can do better in the future. But we know that a lot of individuals who live in Hispanic households are living with individuals that are English learners in some way, shape, or form on that spectrum. So again, I know it's a limitation, and it's what we had to work with. And finally, on this chart is individuals with disabilities. And again, we had a number of questions that identified certain disabilities that we felt represented pretty well what that would then bucket into this particular covered population. I have a little red dot there on the bottom, and that is to remind me that the 8th covered population is incarcerated individuals. So incarcerated individuals in the Digital Equity Act are defined as anyone that is currently in a county or state facility. So the federal prisoners are, even if they're the federal penitentiary in Iowa, that population is considered separate from this particular way of dividing people up. And if they are currently incarcerated, they can't take a statewide survey. So there's no way that we can survey them. But what we did was we actually did some focus group work inside of the prison system. So we were able to talk to a group of incarcerated individuals at the women's facility. And we were also able to talk to a group of individuals in one of the male in Newton, one of the male prisons. And then we also talked to workers that worked with incarcerated individuals at each of those facilities to understand that situation. So we did our best to be able to get some feedback from those individuals on digital equity issues that they face while they're incarcerated, or and then also like what happens when they leave, right? Like what happens when they are released and try to re-enter society. So it's a very interesting aspect of this work, and it's something that we're kind of at the starting line for really understanding that, but we did our best to try to get some of that. Okay, so that's the 8 covered populations, and then for the different colors that you see, basically this is I call it a heat map, and on the top line you see statewide percentage. So this was the statewide average that we got back from all respondents. 91% of people said, yep, we have access. If you had a lower or a less desirable response rate, when we break it out into the covered populations, it would be a shade of red to pink, pink being a little bit less desirable to like a deeper red being like, that's a really big difference between that response rate and the statewide average. And if it's on the other side, if it's blue, that means actually the response rate was a little better than the statewide average. And so there's a ton of this information. Like I'm showing you the most simple one where it's just one question. I have some that are like really complex, and I think Amy's jaw dropped when I showed a couple of them at the last meeting. So I'm not making that mistake again in a presentation, but they do work in the document. And so if you're interested in this stuff, it is worth spending some time and looking at those and seeing what pops out. I like it because if you're just interested in one of the covered populations, you can pretty quickly see the issues that pop out based on just that depth of the color. And if you want to compare the numbers, obviously you can always do that as well. So that's why the heat maps are in there. That's what they're supposed to mean. And if you get in there and you start, what are all these colors? That's what the hope is, that it's just a visual cue, if that helps. Okay. Spent a long time on that slide. So we just pulling some interest on sort of those top level things. So one of the things that we heard in the public meetings was this idea of like, okay, Jeff, that's great. We have access, like we have somebody that we can call, but it's not very reliable. We're working, I'm on a Zoom call and it's 3:00 and the kids are running home from school and they all get on Xbox, and then my Zoom call drops out. And so I can't do anything with work from 3 to 5, right? And you heard that a lot. And there's just this level of reliability that really had people concerned. And so we realized, okay, like we need to kind of figure this out. And we went back to the public survey, and we did ask a question that is at least somewhat directionally related to reliability, which was satisfaction of their home internet. And you could see the bottom two lines here, the bottom two rows of this graph, very dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied. It's a significant percentage of respondents that said, yeah, at some level, I'm not very happy. It's about 30%. And so I did pull the heat map for this one. And you can see comparing statewide percentage at 30% to some of the covered populations, there are some individuals that have much bigger issues with reliability relative to the average population. So the aging population, say the 65 to 74, it was a little higher, 34%, and then it jumps to 40% for individuals that are 75%. Well, 75 or older. Well, why is that? Right. And those are kind of the questions that we continue to need to ask. And I don't want to spoil my thinking too much, but is it set up right? What are the expectations, and how do we make sure that we have that home internet set up correctly and to be able to troubleshoot that? Is that part of the issue? Is that why we're seeing some issues with that particular population, right? So there's a little bit of sleuthing and problem solving that probably needs to go on in each of these. And you might think, well, why is the racial and ethnic minority group, have such better luck with their, why are they relatively more happy than the average population? I don't know the answer to that, but there are certain response rates here that I think may be useful, particularly as we get into individual funding streams to try to address some of these issues. Moving on to affordability. Difficulty of internet to cost to fit into the household budget. A significant percentage of Iowans are having that trouble. One of the interesting things, and I didn't pull any additional information here, but one of the interesting results is that you would expect that individuals that live in a covered household would respond at a higher percentage that they have some difficulty to fit the cost of internet into their household budget. They identify as a lower income Iowan. You would think that it would just be more difficult to afford. Not so in the survey results. Well, why is that? Well, as someone who grew up in a covered household, I'm sure that there's a little bit of the pride that comes through when you're responding to a survey like that. I can't prove that, but I can anecdotally tell you that that's how my parents would have responded to a question like that. And so it's a good reminder that you can't always just take these numbers as perfect and representative of exactly what you're asking, because humans are complex, and sometimes they're going to answer in a way that may not make sense from what your expectations are. So there's a little bit of nuance, and that's why I wanted to mention the affordability stuff, because it's not, the numbers aren't perfect for what you would expect, and I think that there's some interesting psychological and sociological reasons behind that. We asked about digital devices. What are you using? And so the blue part of the bar for each of those devices is who has one of those devices, the percentage of people that have those devices. So smartphone, overwhelmingly, vast majority of people have a smartphone, and it makes sense that that would be the predominant thing that we all have in our pocket. And you see, like, desktops are going down. Less than 50% had desktops, or about 50% had desktops. And so there's just different level of usage of different devices. Okay, that's kind of interesting, right? Like, it just seems like a lot of devices, but maybe not, overwhelming. And so I think this question is actually really interesting that we asked as a bit of a follow-up, which is, does your household have enough computer devices available to meet the needs of everyone living in your home? And this, to me, this looks like a big number. Like, wow, yeah, most people have enough devices. That's great. And then I think, well, it's actually a pretty big number of people that don't. If you kind of look at it the other way too, particularly knowing some of the limitations of the response rate and the groups that we did get to respond, there's still a lot to be done here. And so if you break this down into our covered populations, again, I like data. I find this stuff pretty fascinating. So hopefully you guys are at least with me a little bit here. But so 88% of the states said, yeah, we got enough devices to cover our needs in the house. And look at that aging population. They're good. Like, they think they got more than enough devices, right? But then you go down into some of the other covered populations, racial and ethnic minorities, our English learners, proxy, the Hispanic population, and individuals with disabilities, far below that mark of 88% for the state. So this was one where it was like, whoa, we've got a lot of work to do, in certain pockets, to be able to get this. And maybe this goes without saying, but I probably should establish, this survey was well represented with aging individuals, as you might expect. Like, that they came out in force, and they are well documented for the response rate of aging individuals. Some of these other response rates are a little lower, but still, I think, incredibly interesting just how stark this particular chart is. And this, I think, can help guide us where we would want to target any kind of device program that we may develop in the future. So there's a ton of stuff like this, and I just wanted to show this particular chart about digital skills to let you know that it's here. We don't have to break down each individual component that's here. I broke this out into introductory digital skills, intermediate digital skills, and advanced digital skills, because we asked a bunch and I found it all interesting. I chose the dividing lines based on how I wanted to show the data. I'm not making a value judgment on whether or not bookmarking a website or creating a web page is introductory to advanced as much as the data told me to do so. But this is really interesting to see what people have a comfort with, where people are, how people are using the internet, and how people are using their digital devices, and maybe where some of these gaps are to try to increase digital skills into the future. And I have a heat map for these, and there's no way I was going to show that on this presentation. But again, this is one that you could definitely spend more than a few minutes just kind of staring at, being like, oh wow, okay, this is interesting. Some of those digital skills questions were very specific to online privacy and cybersecurity. And that became a recurring theme in some of the public meetings. And we felt like it was important enough to really pull out as a separate issue. So this idea of privacy and cybersecurity, it came from all different types of demographics. And, aging individuals are worried about getting taken advantage of, new Iowans worried about getting taken advantage of, a lot of younger people, not worrying about getting taken advantage of and then getting taken advantage of, right? So there's a lot of issues that come in this space. And we felt like it was enough to pull out, be like, hey, we really want to make sure that this is one aspect of this work that we really kind of focus on. So we asked three very specific privacy and cybersecurity questions that are underneath those digital skills, but we're going to track these very closely as we work in this privacy and cybersecurity space to try to increase these responses. So wanted to make sure that we established that. So again, we started with 4 digital equity facets, and when we got to the goals stage, we had 7 things that we wanted to craft goals around. So this is just a visual that helps. It's kind of like a pie piece from Trivial Pursuit, although Trivial Pursuit had 6 pie slices. We have 7. So, we got the +1. But so we crafted goals around availability, reliability, affordability. Amy's back. Okay. All right. Answered my question. I will keep going. I will try to be, I'm not going to read every word on these visuals, but all of this is in there in the goals section of the document. What we did was we tried to craft strategies to try to help us reach some of the challenges that we found in each of these goals, and then some of the key activities that we had. So for reliability, I'm working with my partner program, which has hundreds of millions of dollars to try to close the accessibility gap throughout the state. So I'm trying to work with them to make sure we're making that a realization for all Iowans by the time that their grant period ends. Not much that digital equity can push. It's more about coordination to make sure that I'm giving them everything that they need to be able to close those gaps. In some ways that may be working with like family dwellings, like apartment houses, to try to get efficient Wi-Fi access to apartment houses, things like that, that might pass by if you're not kind of thinking about it. The other strategy that we had around this was to develop and have people participate in a Wi-Fi access program. We would like to call it something like Wi-Fi-owa, which is kind of fun. I can't put that in the plan yet because I can't brand it quite yet, but that's kind of where we're going. But the idea is like, where are these free access locations? There's obviously like our libraries are really good locations to be able to go and access free Wi-Fi. There's other places that may want to participate. We would love to find some kind of branding package. We'd love to map these on Google Maps so people understand where they can go. People may not always feel comfortable, say, like going to working at a Starbucks where you're kind of expected to, buy a coffee or something like that. We would love to have more like, hey, you don't have to buy anything. This is just free access internet, and you can plug in this way. We'd love to map that and make that as available as possible. So I think that's a doable goal, something I think that can be done in the near term of this implementation. In terms of reliability, this one's hard. It's tricky, right? We can't necessarily say, well, we want 6 providers to all site into one place. Like that's not really our place. But one of the things that we really talked about that we liked was, how does the individual understand what they're getting from what they're paying? And one of the things that is out there is your internet service provider is going to have basically like a nutrition type label, like something that you would pick up and you'd look at the nutrition label and you say, oh, it's 250 calories and, it's like 6 grams of added sugar, right? That kind of thing. They're trying to duplicate that model with your broadband service so that you understand what it is that you're getting, what you should expect to get in terms of upload speed, download speed, latency, those kinds of things. So you can see the numbers that of the package that you're purchasing. And then one of the things that we would like to push a little bit more is how do you set up this Wi-Fi network? How do you set up this Nest thing that I have, that's sitting over here? How do I make sure that I'm putting my home Wi-Fi in the best position possible to capture as much speed as I can? And that I think is just a way that I think we could improve a lot of the reliability issues just through a little bit of education, information education type campaign stuff to make sure that we're all kind of setting up with the right internal house routers. And then, is there a way that we can systematically or at least have consistency in speed tests and understanding what you may think that, hey, this isn't what I'm paying for. But if you're not running a speed test and you're not doing it with the right equipment, you're just kind of guessing, right? And so if we have a way to really consistently show what it is that you're getting at home versus what you're paying for, that should, I think, hopefully that'll take care of a lot of the reliability issues in that way. But if not, then we have an opportunity to kind of elevate, say, hey, we're consistently seeing this as an issue. We want to bring this to your attention and have a way to report that. So that's how we would like to try to approach some of the reliability issues, concerns that we've heard throughout the state. This idea of digital navigator is something that comes up pretty regularly as well. I think I'll talk about that maybe in digital skills. In terms of affordability, there's a couple of aspects that a couple of strategies that we went into pretty in depth. One of them is that there's something called the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's the federal program that helps qualifying individuals pay for their internet subscription. $30 a month for those they're eligible. If you're eligible on a Native American, as a Native American, it's $75 a month. And so it's pretty substantial to help a pretty big portion of Iowans that may push them over and be able to afford internet. Right now, that particular program looks like it's going to run out of money in about April. And there's some legislation that's on the table in Congress right now. I think it's supposed to be introduced today. And so I don't know what the future is for that particular program. It's pretty important for what we're trying to accomplish here. Iowa's enrollment rate is pretty low. It was 43rd out of 50 states in terms of percentage of eligible households. So if we do have the Affordable Connectivity Program or something like it into the future, we'd love to try to drive a higher percentage of enrollment. I want to see Iowa at least achieve parity with the national average. I don't see why we should be less than the national average. And so that's what I pushed in terms of trying to achieve that. The other strategy was we have a really good opportunity to help expand and augment our public library program to have Wi-Fi checkout hotspots. About 20% of our libraries currently have some form of this. They could probably use new and updated devices at some point, but I would love to see that at least go up to 50%. That's what it says in the plan, and if it's successful, we can shoot for higher. And so this would address individuals that even with a $30 subsidy may not feel comfortable having a subscription, internet subscription, but maybe they do have this opportunity to pull a Wi-Fi hotspot program from their library and have it at least intermittently, so that they could accomplish some tasks. And then goal 4 is about digital devices. I'm not going to go through every aspect of this, but the idea here is to understand that there is basically a marketplace of devices that have plenty of useful life left for Iowans after they're done serving like a business purpose. So think about, think about a big insurance company in the Des Moines area that has a regular schedule of updating their devices. Generally their approach would be to then send those devices to an e-waste recycler, so that they can be properly disposed of. There's useful life left in those devices. And so if we can refurbish those devices and get those into people that would qualify, we could address some of those digital device issues that happen throughout the state. So that's kind of the supply side, the demand side in terms of how do we get this out to people? That's another part of this, and how do we make sure that they're getting the technical support that they may need. It's one thing to hand somebody a device, but if they don't know how to use it, or if they're really kind of questioning how to troubleshoot, we want to be able to make sure that we're providing an outlet for that. And so this idea of like creating a device ecosystem, from finding the supply to establishing a refurbishing standard and somebody to do that, and then getting those devices out to those individuals. That's really what Goal 4 is all about. And then this idea of trying to be able to provide some level of technical assistance, if that's even possible. That's definitely a big thing. Hanging out with my in-laws over Christmas reinforced many, many times just how important this is for certainly certain portions of our population. Even bigger topic, digital skills. Again, there's so many different digital skills and so many different ways that people need to use these devices to get to the outcomes that they want. It's such a big topic, and there's so many good people that are working like in the Department of Education that have an interest in this type of work. And so I'm really eager to get going on something like this. But we would love to develop some level of statewide digital skills curriculum, establish a platform that people can use. Obviously, working for the state, I would love to find a way to make this free and accessible to people so that they can bring themselves up to a standard that it's accessible to people, regardless of their needs or special considerations. That's the goal. Like we want to be able to make something that everybody can reference, be like, hey, just go to this site and take this module that the state of Iowa has, or maybe Minnesota has something like this, and we can say, hey, can we dip into this? Can we partner? Those are the kinds of conversations that I need to have over the next 6 to 12 months, is to understand where these other states are going with this, and maybe see if we can develop something either together or kind of piggyback off of what they're doing. So a lot of really interesting stuff in this digital skills space. One of those things is this idea of digital navigators. We have currently one digital navigator in the state, working for a nonprofit that is, that's her job, is she helps people in the community troubleshoot these issues that they may have with their tech, or learn how to use their laptop, learn how to use their tablet, set up Zoom, like all those things. That's what she does. And so, is that a model that can be replicated in terms of full-time navigators, and how could the state support something like that, in terms of trying to cite those? Could there be a way to tap into the navigation idea, people that are navigating for other issues, and have like a certification that would tap into just digital equity type things? So you may be navigating, how you get through Medicare applications and things like that, or there's different navigators for different things that are out there. Can we tap into that network and have a certification or a badge that says, hey, now you're also a digital navigator, and you can provide that higher level of service? And so we're really interested in trying to develop that network out and try to plug into that program. Essential services. So this is something that Amy, I think, particularly is very interested in. And this has shifted a little bit from what the original ideas were. And I think actually shifted is probably not a right word. I think it's improved. And that is like, we would like to develop and manage an accessibility review process for everything that happens at the state. So even bigger than what I was pitching and dreaming and talking to Amy about this, which is, how do we work particularly at the government level to say, okay, you're building something new here. Here are the things that you have to consider and develop a process for for reviewing all of those new things and making sure that they're accessible. So this has currently, a pretty nice level of support internally for us to take these steps. So I'm pretty proud of this one, particularly for talking to Amy's group. And then, tease that privacy, cybersecurity. This, I think, specifically in terms of digital skills, we want to develop some cybersecurity type modules and increase that. And then also that digital navigation. I think there's not only is there digital navigator, but like a special badge, to talk about the privacy and the cybersecurity piece of this as well. Iowa is already part of cybersecurity awareness campaign, but we want to make sure we continue that and maybe augment where we can, and maybe make that be a little bit more prevalent in the work that we do. So those are the aspects under privacy and cybersecurity. So those are the 7 goals. I'm gonna take a quick drink. I feel like okay. So that's a section of the plan where it details all 7 of those goals, goes into more specifics, kind of how we got there. And then there are 8 sections of covered populations. So those 8 covered populations that I identified. Some of the things that were identified in those covered population sessions really were mentioned multiple times, and they came together to form pieces of those 7 big goals and those strategies. Some of the things that were mentioned were maybe a little bit more specific to that particular covered population. And so it's not necessarily a statewide goal. It may be something that the state tries to lead or approaches or takes care of within the plan, but it may also be an opportunity for a partner group or an organization to say, hey, it's mentioned on page 123 of the plan that this is a need, and I work for this organization that works directly with these individuals, and we would like to this much money to be able to accomplish this part of the plan. That's how we're hoping this works. And so I just pulled a couple of the examples from the individuals with disabilities covered population section, just to kind of give you a flavor of what part of this said. So, one of the things that we talked about with regards to digital devices, develop a standardized assessment process to understand individual hardware needs for individuals with disabilities. It's at some level there, a general piece of tech, it may not meet the needs of an individual with a disability. So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what it is that you need? It may not be something that's just off the shelf. It may need an extra layer, or if it is off the shelf, it may need a download of a certain software to be able to get you where you need to go. Right. So what are those things that you need, and how do we make sure that we can get those out? This reinforces the second one reinforces digital navigators, which came up a lot, but I just think specifically it was called out in this particular session. And then I also included the inventory of resources and network of resource providers accessible to individuals with disabilities to better acquire necessary devices and training to accommodate an individual's needs. So again, are there going to be places or individuals that understand that there may be a little bit more of an advanced need for certain populations, and how they address that. So these are good ideas, and they certainly shouldn't be lost. And so they needed to be captured. And I think that we captured them in a way that will be useful to us at the state in the future, but also provide opportunities for our partners to get involved in this work. That's my hope, because the more people we have around the table, the more people that are applying for money, the more of this that we're going to get done. So that's the big piece. I've got, I think, 2 more. Moving forward in terms of strategy, I think just 2 big messages. One is that we really need to continue to talk to each other. We really need to continue to have some level of regular meetings. And so I pitched this idea of like a coordinating council, and then at some level, maybe work groups or representative groups that talk about these individual goals. The 7 are listed, and then the 8 covered populations. So some combination of people that are interested in maybe a specific element of this work, people that are like, I am obsessed with, digital devices, or I'm obsessed with privacy and cybersecurity concerns. Or there's people that are like, hey, I represent this group of people and I'm interested in all of these aspects, but I'm really interested in it with respect to, people with people that are aging or people with disabilities, right? Those are the things that we want passionate people that can participate in this, and through a regular coordination to be able to carry these ideas through. And then this is just how I approach any plan that I've ever done, which is I want to focus on the stuff that I can get done, that has a high impact, but is pretty easy. That's the low hanging fruit. If there's anything to pick, I will pick it. But I also know that as the government representative, that I may be in the best position to lead things that are really hard and or expensive to do, but they have high impact. And so they're not going to happen unless something like this program takes the lead. And so we want to make sure we do that. Things that are really complex and really expensive, we're probably going to set aside. But as I talk about in the plan, we may just want to look at it from a different angle and see if there's something you can break off from that kind of sticky thing. And maybe that is how to start things rolling downhill, right? Like, is there just a couple aspects of this that will, if you break them off, they move into a different category? And then once you get that going, does that problem get a little easier to solve down the line? And then, there are some things that from a statewide perspective may be low cost, but low impact to, the broad group, but there may be those same ideas that are super impactful for, someone who say, no, this for our population, this is incredibly important. So those are things that we need to know, because maybe I have this in the wrong quadrant, or maybe this is a good opportunity for you to partner and go after money to be able to capture some resources to be able to get that work done. Okay, final slide. Reiterating that I'm currently in the public comment period. If you want to email me any questions and, hey, what do you mean by this? Or my email's at the bottom, jeff.berckes@iowa.gov. If you want to make an official public comment, you can't do it to my email address. You have to go through that public comment form. An official public comment would be, something that you want to be on the record for that plan. So just try to draw the difference between just emailing me with questions that you might have, and I want to make an official statement about some aspect or the plan in total. And then I already went through the rest of this, but just to know the timeline, I think 2024 is really going to be we're going to get going on how much do we have to work with, who's around, who wants to be around the table, who wants to get on the bus, and where are we going to go, right? How much money do we have to fill up the gas tank, and how far can we drive? I guess if we're going to take that. So that's me talking for a very long time. I would love Amy to give her input in terms of being part of this process for the last year, and maybe what she's learned about this. And then if there's any questions, I'd be happy to talk. Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing, Jeff? Thank you. I want to open up just for, because I know some folks only have till around 2-ish. Do any of you have any questions or comments for Jeff? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. You can turn your cameras on if you want. It's a great opportunity right now if you have any questions or comments for Jeff about this. It's a lot of information, but he seems masterful in my mind at trying to organize it in a useful and productive way. So I'm just going to pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
I felt like I was talking forever, and I also know that it was tip of the iceberg of what I pulled. So that was the crazy thing.
So, I was really fortunate in being able to be a partner in this work, and um, it's been fascinating, and it's also been very fast moving. And there's a number, Jeff was masterful at pulling leaders and partners from a number of different realms together to work on this. And, there's just so much work left to be done. And I look at the individuals who are joining us today, and I just really encourage you. You don't have to know what the solution is or the next steps, but digital equity, especially in the way that Jeff's defined it, is really critical. And there's a number of individuals that our programs and services support where it's a problem. And think about how we've moved, from paper job applications, paper benefits, applications, any number of things in our everyday lives that those of us who don't experience a lot of challenges with having access, with having the right equipment, with having the skills that we need to utilize that equipment effectively and being able to afford it, we take for granted. And I think the populations that have been targeted, and I think, Jeff, you did a great job of highlighting, also where there may be holes or gaps in what we're able to collect by those who participate, by those maybe preconceived notions about how something should be responded to. Whatever it is, we know that technology, especially for individuals with disabilities, and as we are experiencing such a significant workforce shortage across our country, there are more and more options that we're wanting to be able to utilize and explore when it comes to virtual supports. And so we really need people to provide input, to want to be engaged in this. I think, Jeff, you mentioned this. We don't have all the answers. We just know where some of the big issues are, and some of those need unpacked more. And I think with the representation of those of you who are participating today, we have representation from all across the state in all different perspectives. And so I think there's opportunity. If you want to be involved, I think the Department of Management, Jeff, wants you to be involved. And again, don't feel like you have to have a basis of knowledge to get involved and to start those conversations. And there's, I think, only room to hopefully improve on all those areas that Jeff talked about, and that may surface once we start to implement the work. So any additional comments or thoughts that folks have? I want to thank you, Jeff, so much for your time and putting together this presentation, because it is hard when you have such amounts of work to put into a short period of time to discuss. Jeff, there's a Kimberly put in the chat. Thank you, Jeff. This has been a great update. I'm curious, are you planning on having any of your folks who participated over the past year be at the table? Have you received any input from them during this public comment?
So one of those last slides that I had when I talked about like the coordinating council, that is a really good opportunity. I don't know how it's going to look like. Like, I'm still trying to, at some point you have to figure out all of the things that go into standing up a new program. So I don't know exactly what it looks like, but my idea is that we'll try to convene some type of coordinating council with some work groups associated with those that may, so there may be, kind of a choose your own adventure of what you want to get involved with, but I can see people that are interested for there to be a pathway. there has been a little bit of response from what I sent out. So I sent out an email to, there's a couple of people that are on this call that were involved in the facilitated sessions. I sent out an email to all of those individuals, sharing the public comment information and like, hey, respond back to me if you're interested in doing this. I have a little bit of interest and response from that. I also sent out an email to everybody that went to the public meeting. Also got a lot of bounce backs from bad email addresses on those. So handwriting isn't always perfect, but did my best to really try to send out as much information as possible to everybody that was participating along the way. In terms of like official public comments, the answer is no. It's only been a week long though. Generally public comments in my experience come in late in the public comment period. I would also say that public comments are very official. And so if you have, I've received plenty of feedback from people that say like, hey, thank you, this looks great. Hey, this, I would like it if this said this instead of that, like, but not an official comment. I've gotten some of that. I was just, what was I going to say? One more thing. The way that we went about developing the plan, if I had hundreds of public comments, I don't know that that's a good thing, because I think that the way we went about the plan is that we were very deliberate and thoughtful and try to involve a lot of people in crafting the plan. This is not, I don't know the answers. I don't know. I'm an environmental scientist by training. And so I don't have like a background in this work specifically. I know how to plan, and I've done that for the state for most of my career, but I don't have the answers from a knowledge standpoint. So my approach was to lean on people like Amy, who had networks of amazing individuals like you that were doing really great stuff across the state. And so that's how I was trying to build the plan, was through the collective power of everybody in the state, through all of these experts. And so my hope is that somebody picks up this plan and reads through it and says, yeah, that makes sense. And so I don't know what to expect in terms of volume of public comments, but a lot of public comments aren't necessarily a good thing when you're developing a state plan. And so I'm not sure. I'm not, and of course the nature of the comments, of course, I'd welcome them, but I'm not worried if there's not a ton, because I think we've got a really good start. Maybe a weird way to answer that, but that's like,
No, I think it was perfect.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let folks know that our next community practice is the second Thursday of every month, January to October, 1 to 2:30. We are using the same link that you used today. If you haven't, please fill out the evaluation form if you have recommendations on topics. And our next session is February 8th, 1 to 2:30, and it is on transportation. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Jeff, I really appreciate your time. Have a good day, everybody. Stay safe in this upcoming storm.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.